Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Sean. In July of this year, Kyle and I were honored to be a part of the Ultragenyx Rare Family Day. Like many things throughout 2020, this event was facilitated online with participants and viewers from multiple geographic locations. We moderated a panel of incredible patient advocates, and we want to share that conversation with you right now. Please enjoy.
We are so excited to be here and to be talking to all of you. You know, we've had a few conversations leading up to this with some of our panelists, and we are so excited to dig into some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. Hopefully they'll be applicable to everyone. First of all, I want to introduce myself. So I am coming to you from a storage closet in my apartment in Exton, Pennsylvania. However, I am from Sacramento, California. And so I was diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia when I was 17 years old. I'm 38 now. And I was scared. You know, my family and I found out that it would only be a matter of time before I'm in a wheelchair. And it would only be a matter of time before I lose all ability to take care of myself. And it would only be a matter of time before I likely die due to heart disease. And so we were stuck with that and wondering what to do. It took about 10 years to figure out what to do. And my family and I did a cross-country bike ride from San Diego to Memphis, Tennessee. And we got involved in the FA community, started raising money for research. And now I'm on staff at the Friedreich's Ataxia Research Alliance. And I am just so glad to be in touch with the whole FA community, because we know community is really what makes it happen. So that's a little about me, and I'll hand it over to Sean.
I love hearing a bit of background noise come in over Kyle. It seems, chaotic, but that's really a glimpse of what's going on inside his head as he's talking. So it's a glimpse of reality, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Kyle. Like he said, I'm Sean, and I too was diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia, but I was almost 26, so on just before my 26th birthday, diagnosed with FA. And of course, that far along in life, I never really thought about rare disease or anything drastically wrong. I chalked it up to an exercise issue, or my balance problems were more of a didn't sleep enough, or I drank too much, or whatever the issue may have been. And when I was diagnosed with FA, like most of us familiar with rare disease, you feel totally alone. And I love Emil's words, because what Ultragenyx is doing, and the whole point of Rare Family Day, is to bring community together and make it stronger. So I love the approach Ultragenyx is taking to support and really lead the efforts in the rare disease community. Shortly after I was diagnosed, I met Kyle. Like he said, he lived in Sacramento, and that's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm from. That's home. So we were able to connect, became friends, and we shared this mission in life to do everything we possibly could while we could, in spite of what the diagnosis was, or despite what might be in our future down the road. So we started joining forces on rides and events and fundraisers And as you can see in the photos, we've done some pretty gnarly hikes and bike rides and some pretty cool stuff. And in my opinion, it's cool. All because we have a job to do and we know we're limited on time. And there's no better way to live life than to do so with some urgency. You never know. And I think COVID's a perfect example. You never know what tomorrow may hold. So here we are producing a weekly podcast and working together to do what we can to support and help encourage folks in the rare disease community. And we're happy to be here.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we'll introduce our panelists. Carolina, would you mind sharing with our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Next, can you move to the next slide? Yeah, so I'm Carolina. Okay, yeah, that's good. I'm the CEO and founder of Born a Hero Research Foundation. Thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor to be here with everybody. Imagine 1980s Colombia. Pablo Escobar was at the height of his power. Guerrillas take over the land and houses with no consequences. Your siblings are robbed at gunpoint at school and walk home barefoot. Their schools get bombed. You receive death threats and very real kidnapping threats. That's the world I grew up in. I found at a young age that if I wanted something to get better, I had to work for it myself, and I had to make that change. Then I moved to the United States because my stepdad was fighting cancer when I was 8 years old. And then, ironically, 2 months after that, I spent over a year in and out of the hospital. I was bleeding in my brain, and the doctors eventually found the source and saved my life. I have always had a special place in my heart for Children's Hospital and people who treat rare diseases. But that doesn't mean I was ready for when my own daughter was born with a rare disease. My daughter, Mariana, has Pfeiffer syndrome. It's a rare genetic disorder that causes bones to fuse in infant's skull and extra bones to grow throughout the body. It took us 2 years to get a diagnosis, and the diagnosis didn't prepare us for all the struggles we were about to face. Countless nights crying next to a hospital bed, not knowing, sorry, I didn't know I was gonna get emotional. Okay, sorry.
You're good.
I was not expecting that. It comes every once in a while. Not knowing what was going to come next, because there's not a lot known about Pfeiffer syndrome. My daughter's a happy, spunky, funny, and smart little girl, but she's one head bump away from being paralyzed, one shunt failure away from brain damage. Maybe tomorrow she'll have a knee problem and she'll be going into surgery next week. Next, sorry. Next slide, please. Thank you. Born a Hero Research Foundation works to accelerate innovation and research to improve the quality of life for FGFR syndromes. We work on 15 rare diseases, 15 syndromes, including Pfeiffer syndrome. We strongly believe that through collaboration, we can accelerate research. I started Born a Hero to try to get some answers to the questions I had after my daughter was born, and to help other parents with their questions. I continue to be inspired by the resilience of these kids and our community, by the strength of their parents, and they're what motivates me to keep working. And because I want to do something, because if I want something to get better, I have to work to make that change myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. I think it's totally a community moment when you get emotional like that. I actually love to see that because we've all been there, right? And we know exactly where you are. And that's what I love about community, is that you're in front of and with people who would totally understand that. So with that in mind, Katie Stevens, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, and in my screen, I'm right next to you, Carolina, and I was like trying to and then my arm would not reach around and hug you, but I was trying. I'm right here next to you. So hi, my name is Katie Stevens. I'm the executive director of Team Telomere. Emil, I felt so strongly about what you said about the ocean metaphor. When my son was diagnosed, next slide, please. He was 12 years old and was faced with a rare disorder. We hadn't quite gotten to the genetics of it yet. And a man in Boise, Idaho. I live in Idaho. It's a state. It's actually a state in the United States. And it's not in the Midwest, as many people think, told me we would be a little tiny island in an ocean of cancer because where he was being treated was primarily pediatric cancer. So whereas your metaphor was floating in the ocean, we were a little tiny island in the ocean. So that just spoke to me. And I just had no idea how this little boy and his diagnosis would change not just his life, but all of our lives. And I can see how our island is connected to so many other islands. Next slide. I had no intention of being anybody's advocate but my own child's. That was I actually went to his 1 year post bone marrow transplant appointment in Boston and said, I think I'm done. I'm not going to go to Camp Sunshine anymore. We're just going to live our lives. And by the end of the week, I was the president of Dyskeratosis Congenita Outreach, and which has now changed our name to Team Telomere to be more inclusive to the other telomere biology disorders. It's multi-system, multi-organ failure, and there's so much to the complicated disease that we wanted to make sure that we were supporting everyone in that diagnosis in their journey. I went from being a stay-at-home mom to someone that was presenting, leading, teaching at places like Mayo Clinic, helping create conversation around GI bleeds that at the NIH that was later published with my name along, famous researchers around the world. And these are things I didn't expect. And the final picture on the right is me grabbing up a bunch of fleece for our care package program, which was the heart. We have the science, but we also have the heart in our organization, which is the best of both worlds for me. So my son is now 19 years old, 5 years post bone marrow transplant, doing very well, living his own life. And I get to be quote unquote, the caregiver to our community now instead of the caregiver to my child. So that's sort of me in a nutshell. And I'm so excited to be here. I met Kim Cohey at the Global Genes Summit, and I just won't forget her late at night. We had all, finished our stuff. Sean and Kyle and a bunch of us were sitting around, and Kim yelling across the room, Katie Stevens! So I knew I could hang out with Ultragenyx from then on, because it just, you guys have created a space that feels like home and like you're truly trying to help. So I'm so honored to be a part of this. Thank you.
It's usually a bad idea to talk about the late night activities
oh, yeah, I know.
at a conference.
Sorry. All I said was my name. I didn't say what else. No. I think my new tattoo was shown. We just won't go any further with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. I love hearing that you thought you were going to walk away.
Yeah.
And by the end of the week, you were helping run the organization.
Yeah.
In my opinion, whether you're running the organization or you're volunteering or you're on a board or whatever spot you're in, there's no better way to influence change than to remain in the mix somewhere. So I'm glad on behalf of Team Telomere and the rare disease community that they didn't let you go. They got you stuck. Yeah. Sharon, we'd like to meet you, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about who you are.
Thanks, Sean. I'm co-founder of Taylor's Tale. We started the organization in 2007 when my daughter Taylor was diagnosed with CLN1 disease, which is a form of Batten disease. And, if I wanted to describe Taylor's Tale, I would tell you it's the little engine powered by Taylor King. And we named the organization because we wanted to use her story to make a difference for children and families like ours and children and families living with other rare diseases. And we focus on her story, and her story is one of determination. She faced a disease that would take her sight. She'd have seizures. She would lose her ability to walk, to talk. She'd lose that ability to swallow food. That disease would take everything from her that it could, and then it would take her life. But she faced it head on. She was this sweet, sassy kid, and she was like fireworks because she would just light up the sky when you were with her. And she never gave in. She never gave up. To the very end, she laughed with us. She was the happy kid. She taught us, and she taught me, lessons of life that I think we all need, because she mostly focused on joy and what she could do and not what she couldn't. I remember her coming home from school one day, and this was a few years post-diagnosis, and she had just participated in a landmark clinical trial. She was on some pretty heavy meds, and but she comes home waving this application in the air, and she wants to participate in Girls on the Run. And if you don't know Girls on the Run is a program created to inspire confidence and compassion in young girls. It integrates running, for a healthy lifestyle and goal setting and a feeling of accomplishment. Sounds great, right? Well, you're thinking I must have grabbed that application and signed it as quickly as I could and said, how can I help? Well, wrong. I jumped in and said, oh, sweetie, you can't do this because you can't see and you have all of these doctor's appointments. And I can still to this day see her balling up her fist and stamping her foot. And she said, oh, yes, I can. I can run with my friends. I want to do this. I learned a lot that day. She was my third child. She was this bonus child. My first two children were 16 and 11 when she was born. You'd think I'd have all those parenting skills, but I must have missed something, because she changed my life that day. She taught me a lot that I had never figured out. She changed me. She changed the way we decided to run Taylor's Tale. She changed her friends. It was absolutely, joining that group was absolutely what Taylor needed. And she succeeded because she ran that 5K and she finished it. And 5 months later, she ran it again and she improved her time. So it gave her joy in the midst of these huge challenges. And that's the lesson we all can learn from Taylor. And those of us, whether we're faced with a rare disease, a loved one with a rare disease, or just every day, because she taught us more about living life than we'd learned in many, many years. So for Taylor's Tale, quality of life is everything. It's our umbrella goal as we seek to help children and families with rare disease. We focus on three things that we believe patients and families need for best quality of life. And they're based on those lessons we learned from Taylor. The first is patients need a treatment. Patients need public policy that works, because a treatment without the policies that create those pathways for access isn't really going to serve the needs of the community. And then we believe that patients and families need the best clinical care and support systems possible, because rare diseases aren't easy. They're not always understood. They're often not recognized. And so our most recent initiative was the creation of a CLN1 disease clinical care management consensus. We brought in 14 clinicians from around the world with the most CLN1 disease expertise, or they've seen the most number of patients in clinic, and we brought them to sit around a table for 3 days in here in North Carolina and to talk about best clinical management practice. And we're just weeks away from submission to journal with that paper. So we're really excited about that. So to end, Taylor passed away in September of 2018. And she was just weeks past her 20th birthday. But like Taylor, Taylor's Tale is not going to give in or give up until we've reached our goals. And it's her brand of determination that guides us and moves us forward.
I love that you said something to the effect of Taylor focusing on what she could do rather than what she couldn't do. And that reminds me of a quote, something I heard from Eric Thomas. He's a motivational speaker. He said something recently I heard on a podcast, and he said something to the point of, or to the effect of, the answer to the problem is your commitment to the solution. So it's not giving energy to the problem or the issue. It's giving all of your energy and your focus and your willpower to the solution, whatever's going to help you move forward. And I love hearing that even in her young teenage years, she was committing to doing what she could, more so than being, beat up about what she couldn't do.
Yeah, that was true.
So Sharon, I think I want to begin our conversation with some questions for you. You shared that she passed away just after her 20th birthday. And for me, the natural question is, I completely understand why you launched Taylor's Tale and why you began the work that you're doing today. But I'm curious about, even in the face of losing Taylor, what keeps you motivated to continue this legacy that you and Taylor started?
Well, it's first of all, it's meeting those three goals, because that was her brand of determination. That we're not there yet. We haven't finished the race. But it's also, I've come to know this community, and I've embraced it like family. I go to conferences and meetings, and I feel like these other patients and families are my family now. We share something really deep that is something that we share together. But what keeps me going is that I'm goal-oriented. And it's a promise that we made to her that, we wouldn't let Batten disease win. That until we could cross that goal line, because she was all about crossing goal lines, we would stay after it. And we've done that. I think a lot of people expected us to quit. I even had a friend who called me not long after she passed away and said, so you're done with this? We're going to play bridge. And I thought, no, I have work to do. I have as much work to do as ever. So, and we filled up that time. The time that caring for a child with a rare disease it's time consuming. It's all consuming. And we made time for Taylor's Tale, but I've taken that time and used it as part of her legacy, you might say.
I love that you also talked about bringing all those clinicians together and continuing your work. To me, I see that as you and Katie and Carolina and everybody involved, Ultragenyx and beyond. What we're doing is creating roadmaps, if you will, for the folks that get diagnosed next year or 5 years from now. And that work is so important because we know right now diagnoses will continue to come, and people will continue to have questions and continue to wonder where to begin. And when you talk about getting courses together and publishing in the journal and getting some cohesion to best practices, that just helps pave the way for so many families that are going to come after us.
Yeah,
And I think with what she was saying, you know, I think we can always work to get better. And, you know, I mean, I think there's always something we can do to grow. We started with just Pfeiffer syndrome. Now we're doing 15 rare diseases. Now we're doing a fair, you know, with a rare disease fair. Now we're starting a rare disease council. You know, I think there's just always something you can work towards, but I think it's also good at the same time to set small goals for yourself, you know, and always just have different goals and, you know, see where it takes you and have an open heart to where that will lead. And yeah.
So Carolina,
Taylor,
yeah.
until we stop this.
Carolina, I'll throw the next question to you.
All right, bring it on.
I'm wondering, you know, you talk about your daughter and currently, you know, Sharon mentions it's consuming to parent a rare disease child. And you've obviously got a lot going on. You've got your daughter and not only your life in the family house, but also all the activities that you're doing with Born a Hero and things of that nature. So how do you balance this conundrum or war, if you will, sometimes of the big picture, wanting to make change long term, but also being a mom in the moment and having a good time with your daughter and finding ways to make her laugh and smile? How do you balance quality of life today versus everything down the road?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question because I think that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for even everybody, but, you know, balancing your life. But yeah, I think life is all about balance. And, you know, I try to, with Mariana, I try to focus on her strengths, recognizing her weaknesses, but focusing on her strengths, empowering her. And I made her be a speaker. I've made her write books. You know, empowering her, telling her how beautiful she is. At the same time, you know, like family life is important. So at the same time, you know, she has all these things, but she has to be a kid, right? I can't let her disease define her. And so finding a balance between medical, right, and just empowering her and letting her be a kid. And at the same time with everything else, I actually work at night when they're asleep so that I can be a mom and I can homeschool and I can, and I just do one step at a time and I never know where anything's going to lead. I just kind of do it. So whoever needs help, I kind of just, you know, and that's one problem I think that is actually not very good is that I have a hard time focusing, but again, it's finding that balance and helping where you can and seeing where it takes you. Like I said, you know, we have I have 2 councils that we're starting. Like Sharon said, I think it's important to have the legislative part, also the fair, because I think it's important to bring the rare disease community together and finding a balance between trying to find, you know, a balance between that and chores and house and just life, you know.
Yeah.
It all works out in the end. It does.
Carolina, judging from the results of all your effort, you know, it does work out. And also, I wanted to point out that, you know, leading up to this panel, some of your emails were coming in at like 3 a.m. And I'm like, all right, so she does work in the middle of the night, just like Gisette. So, yeah.
Not a lie.
You know, I do have friends that my night owl friends that I know who my people are at 1 and 3 in the morning.
Nice. Yeah, nice little midnight chat session.
Good stuff. Everything done.
Yep. All right, Katie, I have a question for you. You know, today is called Rare Family Day, and it's all about community and the connections we make. We know that you're an incredibly strong and resourceful person, but we also know that we all have those times that we need to lean on other people. And I wanted to ask you about a time where someone else came in and kind of showed you the way and you were able to lean on somebody else through a tough time?
Yeah. You already got tears out of me. I didn't even say anything. So when I started this journey, I was, deer in the headlights, just like everyone else. I think no matter your background, whether you're medical or not, when you are faced with this, either personally or as the caregiver, you just don't know what to do. And ours just kept getting more complicated and more complicated, to the point where we fought to get Riley experimental bone marrow transplant in Boston. And so we moved 3,000 miles away from home. I left my 3 kids and my husband back home. I had a baby who wasn't quite 2. I ended up, his first day of chemo was my little one's 2nd birthday. So very alone in that feeling of, 1, leaving family, 2, feeling like, I still have those moments where I'll look at my husband, and though we were both in it, one of us had to be home and one of us had to make money and have insurance and all of those things, looking at him and saying, but you didn't see him in day 2 chemo. That's something that I hold as a memory. But when I showed up in Boston, we already had people, and that was through the community that was given through Team Telomere and Camp Sunshine. We had a friend, Susan, whose son, Maddie, shares the disease in a different spectrum. She made sure that, and her husband, John, who is the typical, like, let's go, Stevens, I'm going to show you, get in the car, let's go, the guy, the Boston guy. And he took us all around Boston, and he showed us Harvard and these beautiful roofs that, you don't think about how beautiful the well, I do. I don't know how many people, he knew that was important to me, and took us to Blue Man Group and the HABA, and made sure we had lobster. And it was just like, and Maddie, their son, introduced me to Diet Coke, which is still an issue for me. But they were there, you know what I mean? They just showed up. And if you have that in your life, and I believe that's there for everybody. If you just look in the right place, perhaps your disease doesn't have community yet, but there's all these different avenues. Like I've said, I've made so many friends in the rare space. And even though we have a different story, it's still the same. And we can support each other like family. So that was, and also I just want to give a shout out to his doctor, when we were in Boston, and it was an especially dark day for me. And Riley was, Benadrylled out, and he wasn't there really. He was just in the bed, and his doctor pulled me into the hallway, and he said, we have to get Riley through transplant, but we have to get you through transplant too. And that was just a really strong moment for me. And I had people in the hospital, and I had people outside of the hospital, and it just had that ripple effect. And I had to be able to allow that too.
Katie, those are really touching stories. And I think, you point out that it's our responsibility and to look for those people that can support us. But I think it's also up to us to be those people as well, right? For others in our community, because we know how powerful it is.
Yeah, I definitely think returning the favor is such a part of just community in general. I mean, we can see it now with the COVID crisis, what's going on. Like, we can be those people for the people that are the most afraid they've ever been in their lives right now. I got my yoga teacher training this year, and we were sitting there, and one of the gals had said, like, I just couldn't believe this lady. She heard a cough and she put her lettuce back and she left the store. And I thought, but what if she is so afraid of what that cough could do to her and her family? Like, we get that perspective, and we can share that perspective. And what a neat time to be in the rare space.
I love that you talk about whether it be that doctor or the Bostonian who drove you around town, and Carolina even talks about having her people at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Essentially, we all know, and I believe we need tribes, right? Whether it's walking through a medical concern or a financial crisis or a failed relationship, we all need a tribe to get through this thing we call life. And I think What I want to say real quick is a huge thank you to the folks that are tuning in, because we know so many of you work for Ultragenyx or you work in the rare disease space, and we know that we couldn't do what we do without your support. So whether you're the CEO or whether you're brand new, you're the intern, or you're just helping file papers or helping manage trial or everything that it takes to go to trial, we know that's complex. And I believe every employee, every position, no matter what you're doing, carries importance. And it's all about coming together as a family, whether we know each other or not, and doing what we can to make life better for so many people around the globe.
And
So thank you.
And I feel like it's not just like the patients too. It's like, you know, everybody else that comes with it. Like Katie was saying, you know, the parents, like, you know, it's like you were saying that your son was going through the chemo but it's like you're going through it too. And it affects so many people in the family and everybody else around, you know, like, I know that I've gotten sick so much just, you know, from the stress and, you know, it just affects everybody around you, not just, you know, the kids too. Just want to add that.
Yeah, the dynamic completely changes. And I'm still, you know, I've noticed, I was just taking stock of each of us. You know, Sharon's lost her child and you're in the midst of your little one's still little and mine's grown, and Kyle and Sean being in it themselves, just how different and how much, I don't know, how many dynamics are in there as a family.
I've said so many times that, you know, when Taylor was diagnosed, her family was diagnosed with her. And not just her immediate family, her extended family. I mean, we all felt that tug, that draw. And so I think back to the ways that we dealt with those dynamics. You know, for us personally, Taylor was a much younger sibling. So when she was diagnosed, Stephen was within a month of heading away for his freshman year in college. Laura had just been married. I mean, she was literally 2 weeks back from her honeymoon when her sister gets this diagnosis. And so already the dynamics were a little different, but we found that even though the older kids were, you know, out of the house at that point, we made it a point to look for a way to keep our family strong and together. You know, when Stephen graduated and was back in Charlotte, we had regular Tuesday night dinners carved out. We knew we were all getting together. When Taylor was mobile and able, we were, you know, we'd find a favorite restaurant or a picnic in a park. When Taylor, you know, but when her mobility was and other issues were more challenging, we had family dinners here. And when it got to the point where I didn't have time to prepare a dinner for the family, we either found a restaurant that could deliver. And then talking about that tribe, now I have friends that if I see them, I just want to run up and hug them and give them a, you know, the biggest bear hug possible, because my friends really, they cared about Taylor and tried to support, but they also cared about us as a family. I didn't have much time. I wasn't spending a lot of time keeping the house clean, and that's important to me. All of a sudden, a housekeeper arrives that the friends, no one would take responsibility for it, but it was, we want to help you be the best you can be for Taylor. And then I had a friend who has a small runs a small catering service. She knew we did Tuesday night dinners, and all of a sudden, Tuesday nights, about the time the older kids and their families were arriving, dinner arrived, plated beautifully, ready to go. So we weren't worried about cooking dinners or washing dishes. We were spending time as a family. And you know, and that's when I hear you talk about, you know, your tribe, you know who they are, and that's how we got through that journey. That people embraced us and realized that, you know, Taylor was the focus, but our family, the whole family was affected by it. And, you know, my older kids, I was lucky enough, they were old enough that they would stay. So Jim and I could have date night occasionally. The older kids would come and stay with Taylor so that we could find 2 hours to realize we're still a couple, even though, we were going in other directions a lot of the time. So, yeah, you're right. It's so important.
Beautiful.
There's a lot of value in that. I, like Katie said, Kyle and I are in the middle of it. I'm not married. I don't have kids, but I imagine there's a certain level of importance to maintain all of those different aspects of life, even in the midst of parenting or being a caregiver. So I love that you share that. That's a part of the challenge, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kyle, I cut you off.
Oh no, that's all right. I was gonna say, we have all of this knowledge and experience with rare disease on this panel. And before we open it up to question answers from the audience, we want to give each of you a chance to, if there's one piece of advice that you could give to either someone who's been newly diagnosed or been in the game for a few years and looking for the next place to make an impact, what would your advice be to them? And we are going to start with Katie Stevens.
I knew it. I just knew it. I knew it. I was like, get ready. Advice. God, I hate giving advice because I don't feel like I'm like the person like who writes parenting books? Like, who decided they're a good enough parent they can write a parenting book? But honestly, I think that's part of it too. Just you hear a lot about grace right now, giving yourself grace through COVID and giving yourself grace through these technical errors in the Zoom meetings. And I think that's honestly, whatever grace looks like for you through this, and maintaining some semblance of normalcy is my biggest piece of advice. Just it can be all consuming, and I let it for a long time. I let Riley's diagnosis be, I had to save my child. That's hard not to let it just become the all encompassing, but give yourself grace and some space to keep some things normal, and don't let it take over every minute of every hour.
Perfect. Thank you. And Sharon, how about you? What's your advice?
Be present and just breathe. When you feel it all closing in on you, just take that breath and stop for a moment. I did that a lot.
I love it. That's so simple and so essential. So thank you for that. Carolina, can you give us something that you hold on to in those tough times?
Yeah, I think take one day at a time. Have goals for yourself. And yeah, life is just short, and it can be, it's true about everybody, I think, though, right? But I think actually having a daughter with a rare disease has made me realize, it reminds me more that I should do that. But I think we should all kind of take one day at a time, look at our children, look at the people around us, be grateful, and live every day fully. And I think that there's just so much we can do, and there's one life and it's so short, and we just need to take actions, not just ideas, but act upon those ideas, and every day try to make it meaningful and impactful.
I want to echo what you said there, Carolina, and you said it earlier as well. So much of life, no matter what you're up against, is about, first of all, being being grateful, having the spirit of gratitude and realizing what is so good in life, but also realizing that you get through it one step at a time. It's one practice session after another. It's one foot in front of the other, one crank of the shaft. It's nobody all of a sudden gets on the top of Mount Everest. It's one foot in front of the other. And I love that you said it a different way, in a couple different ways. And I think it's something we all share. There's so much going on in our world today, and so much going on in individual lives that we may never know about. But putting one foot in front of the other and realizing that that's the way to get through things, that's the way to get to the other side, is so incredibly important. So thank you for saying it in different words. And again, thank you to our panelists for joining the conversation with us and actually being the conversation today. And of course, massive gratitude to Ultragenyx and for the work that you've done to arrange Rare Family Day, and not to skip it just because we're all in our cool houses and apartments, but making it something feasible for all of us to join in, even in this virtual format. So with that, Katie, I'll turn it back over to you. I know we want to open it up for the rest of the program for a little bit of Q&A. So thank you for allowing us to take over for a little bit there.
Absolutely. And thank you, Sean. I think that was a really wonderful conversation full of really great insights, and appreciate all of you sharing, your stories. We know it's not an easy position to share your story in front of a group of a couple hundred people. So just admire your strength that you exhibit here today and just every day beyond that. So just want to remind also the participants, if you do have a question for the panel, go ahead and use that Q&A function. There is a Q&A in the bottom of your toolbar. You just open that up and type in your question. We do have a question from Daniel, and he's wondering if any or all of you can speak about a modification, either an equipment modification or just a life hack that you didn't expect you'd need, but it made a huge difference in ease of life. Does anybody have an example of that?
Sorry, an example of what you said?
Sort of like a modification or a life hack, right? Something that you didn't expect that you'd need to make this modification, but it made life a lot easier. And Sean and Kyle, you can answer these questions as well.
I've got one that comes to mind. I'll share while everybody else thinks about it. I fell, one of the symptoms of FA is a severe loss of balance and coordination. And I fell 8 or 9 months ago, and maybe it was because of FA and maybe not. Who knows? It's hard to say. But I broke my femur in the midst of that fall, and it's been an incredible and excruciating road to recovery. One of the things I've done recently is install a super pole in my bathroom to help make getting up in and out of the shower and, up and down the toilet a little bit easier. And I know a lot of my friends with FA have been using these for years, and I've never really thought about it being important or vital or helpful for me. But I have, now I want to buy 3 more. I have found those poles to be it's just safe. No matter what you're up against, whether it's disease or maybe age or just not any of those. Same with shower chairs. It is not safe to shower without a chair. So I have found those 2 things to be life-changing in the midst of a broken femur, but also, I'm not getting rid of them. I think they're just safer.
Yeah, no, Sean, I think that's an important point, because we think of these adaptive devices and equipment as something that's going to really limit our lives. That's and they become these things that expand our lives and enable us to be who we are. For me, it was huge when I went into a wheelchair like that. I was freaked out. And now I use a power chair, and which is kind of one more step up, right, in the emotional realm. And I would not, I had to use my manual chair the other day, and I was like, oh, this sucks. Those steps, once we, and I think in that process, it's important to relate to each other, because I had friends who were wheelchair users, and they were able to give me insight that helped me make that next step.
Great. Thank you so much. If anybody, I have another question. If anybody doesn't have anything else to add to that one, and it seems to be directed towards Sean and Kyle, but I think it can be answered by everyone because it has applicability to other communities as well and for other people who are listening on the line. But Shiva says, I have ataxia, not Friedreich's, SCA type, not known yet. But they want to be more active and contributing to the community if they can. They live in Southern California and they're asking, where can I start? So from an ataxia perspective, I think you can answer that. But also if we have others on the line who are new to the community and new to contributing, you know, what is your advice on where people can start with that effort?
So I'll go for the ataxia centered question. You know, so I'm on staff at the Friedreich's Ataxia Research Alliance, and we focus on Friedreich's only. However, there is an organization called the National Ataxia Foundation, and they cover all types of ataxia, including SCA. I happen to know in the past, there's been a strong support group in San Diego, and there might even be one in LA too. I'm not sure, but anyway, that's a good place to start looking specifically for SCA.
Yeah, and I think you know, if you're interested in, like, it depends on what your strengths are and your gifts and what you like to help in. I think there are many ways to help, but if it's on a legislative level, I think Every Life Foundation has a lot of, you know, advocacy in your state to talk, you know, opportunities to talk to your legislators through RDLA, and also just getting involved, like Kyle was saying, with the organizations. We always need volunteers, and there's so many places that we need volunteers in. So I'm sure, based on what you're passionate about, that could really help. And, you know, just being involved, becoming a member of the organizations or volunteering in those organizations would be great.
I think a really simple place to start is just telling your story. If you're on social media, Facebook makes it so simple to just share your story. Start a fundraiser for the program that you believe in. Finding, you know, the website, or sharing your story is such a simple one if that's what you're comfortable in. But I think Caroline is right. It depends on what your passion is, whether it's the research part or the outreach part, or, you know, the fundraising part. I think there's so many avenues, just wherever your passion lies.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, whatever your passion is, you know, we know advocates in the community who love to write. And so they have these popular blogs that support not only their story, their community story, but they've expanded it where it, you know, it really tells all of our stories. So I would say just find your passion. For instance, my older daughter, Laura, had never been a runner. But then she saw her sister come across the finish line a couple of times in 5K, and she thought, I will always run for her. And she now runs half marathons around the country for the rare disease community. She's run about half of the 50 states now. And she usually tries to identify a family in that area where she can, you know, elevate their story and tell their story along with the story we're trying to tell. And, you know, so it's find your passion. She has run, and Laura has run her race a couple of times blindfolded because she wanted to run the race like Taylor ran it, without vision.
Wow. So
she trained and she's run 2 half marathons blindfolded.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's dedication.
So amazing. Yeah. So we have 3 organization leaders on the line, and I think we have others as well attending. One of the questions is, fundraising can be so challenging. So what are your best tips for fundraising?
I guess, I mean, that's a huge concern. I think fundraising is a hard thing for the rare disease community because it's rare, right? And so I think you have to be really creative in how you fundraise. Like I know Sharon with the runs and, with auctions, with golf tournaments, with, there's a lot, we do small ones too, like car washes and things like that. But I think we gotten to the point now that actually you just have to be really creative. And our creative way that we kind of do our funding now is that we started the Seattle Rare Disease Fair, where we partnered with Seattle Children's Research Institute. And so, we brought everyone to the rare disease community together, but now we have sponsors, and that's actually our main source of funding for research. So it's just never thought that would be a way to fundraise, but I think also it's just really important to build that relationship with the patients and the people that are really, and the families and the people who are really passionate about what you're doing. And building a newsletter, and those are going to be a lot of times your biggest donors too.
I would agree with that. I think the more connected you are to your community, the more you're going to see. There's a quote Bruce Friedman uses a lot, who many of us know in the rare disease space, and it's, I want to sustain the community that sustains me. And by doing that, you have to communicate with your community. It can't just be on your shoulders. So I think that's a great tip. The newsletters, sharing their stories, having a website, just that communication goes a long way.
I would encourage folks to be specific as well. I'm not known as a successful fundraiser, but I think whether you look at fundraising for the nonprofit or just pursuing business, the more narrowed your focus is, the more precise and the more success you're going to have, because you don't get distracted easily. So I think the way that applies in the fundraising world, if you're specific when you're asking people to help, make sure they know what they're helping with, and be, again, specific. If your organization is just trying to, fund research, what kind of research? How's that going to help people? At what level is that research going to be funded? So being as specific as possible, I think, is good advice that I've heard and read and received myself.
Well, and I think, Sean, too, like with what you're saying, it's like, I'm also not really good at marketing. And so I think it's also just finding the right people in your community that are good at, have that gift of marketing, So I think you have to really know, delegate and know who your community is and who's good at what, so that they can do it. Let the experts do, do what they're good at, and I know that's not one of my strengths either. So.
And just ask.
Yeah.
Somebody says no, that's the worst thing that's going to happen. And I'm kind of known in my community and the larger community as a little bit of a pit bull. So if you say no, I'll make you say yes eventually. So just find, the worst somebody's going to say is no to you. So don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, that's been our most successful way of fundraising. Events are tough. They take so much effort, at least for us. And we've had a hard time getting people involved that want to do big events. So we've learned it goes back to storytelling. Mm-hmm. Tell that story that pulls people in, and they understand what they're, what they are giving to, what they are creating, what they are supporting, and where, the benefit that they're actually making. So that's been our best success.
We've had a lot of success in our community just with letter writing campaigns, right? Like, just tell your story to your friends, and people want to help. That's the way it goes. Yeah.
I agree, Kyle. I think the easiest help for people sometimes is money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Those are all really, really great points. We have one follow-up question along the same topic, is asking if you can talk about any fundraising challenges or how you're navigating through COVID, right? And how that has impacted, and how you're addressing some of the have you seen issues because of COVID and fundraising? And if so, how are you addressing those?
Yeah, I think that, well, like I said, our fair was our main source of funding, and that stopped because of COVID-19. So it was like, oh, great. But there have been some resources through NORD and Global Genes, like grants out there. And then our collaborative research network so canceled. So we moved that to a virtual conference. But I think the nice thing about that is that it brings a whole new group of people. So, that has been something positive that we wouldn't have thought to do it virtually. And now I feel like, oh, now we have the top doctors in the country and people from the UK and, all that normally couldn't have come to the symposium. So it's also opened doors, but yeah, it's been a challenge, but there are resources out there because of what's happened.
I guess we will, it's sort of double-edged sword with COVID. We're finding that we're not spending a lot, so that has helped dramatically. We were able to still fund our $1 million bike ride grant this year, and that was from a generous donor, one-time $30,000 donation, which stunned me and came out of nowhere. And basically, she read a newsletter about research that had been funded previously. So we're just really still trying to stick to the mission. And, we received a grant from Global Genes, and we had to do a follow-up, what's going to happen. And I said, if you could just put a 21 behind everything and we'll hope for the best. We're not asking our community right now. I guess that's the long and short of it. We know that a lot of people are being furloughed, and those that will give will continue to give, hopefully, but it didn't feel like the right time to ask. So, and you never know what's going to happen in these larger grant processes either, what everybody's doing with their budget. So I don't have the great answers. I don't know if anybody on this panel does right now.
I think too, like I've seen people getting really creative, and like I saw one of my colleagues, a rare disease colleague, and they did a run and they just raised $150,000.
Nice.
It's very possible, I guess. And there are platforms for doing auctions, and feel free to email me, Carolina@bornahero.org. But there are platforms to do things like auctions and runs. And I think NORD also has some of those resources on platforms, which platforms to use for that, because there have been a couple organizations doing that type of thing. And so it is possible. I haven't done a race like that personally, but I've seen my friends do the auctions and the races and been successful with them.
Yeah, we're getting ready to kick off a new initiative, and I'll admit a little anxiety, thinking, how's this going to go with, COVID and fundraising not being, as simple as it felt 6 or 8 months ago. So, yeah, I have a little anxiety about it now.
And I think something to consider too in all of this is the compliance factor and how that's changing for all of us state to state that's receiving funds from all over right now, because it's all virtual fundraising, and what that's going to do IRS wise and financially to orgs. I mean, I know I'm supposed to help, but I'm having the anxiety feeling too. Like, what is the ramifications? I know California is changing some things too, as far as fundraising goes. So,
yeah.
Absolutely. All right. We have a couple more questions I want to get to before we get into the next section. We have Kristen from New Jersey who has OTC deficiency, and she notices that every time she goes to the doctor, she's having to re-explain about her disorder because it isn't in medical books. So her question is how she can bring word to the doctors in her area as well, becoming an advocate. As an advocate, how do you, I guess, reach the physician community?
We were lucky enough to have a clinical guidelines and diagnosis and treatment management put out 5 years ago. So that's definitely something that helps our patient community. That's a big task. So it's not like an easy answer for anyone. Sometimes the specialists in your community can write a letter and they can say, this is what you should be paying attention to. this is their needs, here's my email, and connect them to the specialist so that you don't have to continue to re-explain yourself all the time, which is easier said than done. Sometimes it's a pre-appointment thing we've found.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I would. Oh,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Oh, yeah, I guess I was adding to Katie, like, yeah, I think writing something about your syndrome and, handing it over, explaining what it is. And that could be one way. Also, another way to actually get through some physicians and things. What we do is that we have a medical advisory board. So, like, I don't know if there's an organization associated with what you have, but yeah, going to the organization, which has a medical advisory board, I usually direct our patients to them, to the specialist, because we have connections, like as an organization. So that's one way that we get our patients, with, speaking with the physicians and the experts. But I think, yeah, like Katie said, writing a letter and explaining it would be a good way to do that.
I think along the same lines, one thing I might consider doing is putting together what you might call a one page. And on that one page, it's something you can take with you and share with new doctors or nurses that you're seeing for the first time. But that one page, I believe, is more effective if it's quotes or comments or findings from other medical people. Not to discredit your experience or your opinion. What I have found to be most effective with most of the doctors I've seen, they rely on other professional opinions more than mine. So sometimes having the opinions and the experiences that do resound with you, if you can put a quote to that or a doctor's name to it or a MD at the end of that name, that tends to carry, in my experience, a little more weight than just me retelling what I believe to be best or what I think is true. If I can find some research or doctors to support those thoughts, then I think those are that's what I share with my general practitioner, and that's where I've found more success than just telling them what I think or what I know.
And I think maybe the organizations have already
Yeah.
that they can
Some of that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think letterhead goes a long way.
Yeah.
Seeing that medical advisory board on the side goes a long way. So I don't know who has what available to them as far as advocacy organizations, but if you have one, demand something from them. That's their job.
This is why we decided that it was important to take on this initiative to create this clinical care consensus.
Yeah.
And it was, again, based on experience, going in and trying to talk to doctors and telling that same story. And, because I'm not a doctor, I feel like the families, caregivers, we understand a lot about what we're living with because we're living with it every day, but we're not the doctors. And so Sean's right. We have this, sometimes it's a credibility issue. So that's why we wanted to do this initiative, something that not only is available, to clinicians, but available to families. Every time a new family is identified, they receive this. It's something that they can get in their hands. They can take it into their appointments. They can share it. And then again, I think it's building. You have to build these relationships with these clinicians. I look back and I think, Taylor's primary care physician called me every year before her annual and said, okay, I know the annual's coming up. Let's talk about what you think Taylor's going to need in her next year. What are her needs going to be? What is your expectation so that we can be prepared now and start thinking about this and how we'll move forward. But that's not what everybody gets. And it took a long time to build that relationship.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to kiss her doctor on the cheek just now because that's amazing.
Yeah. She was, I couldn't believe it, but every year it came.
Wow.
How can I help you and so that I can help Taylor? Yeah, but it doesn't happen very often.
Mm-mm.
Really great advice and insights. One more question before we move on, and also just a comment. Angela did want to say that she's very inspired and encouraged by each of your stories and really finds it strengthening for her and her ability to advocate. So she just wanted to make that comment. And also Robin from Connecting Families UCD Foundation said that she's struggling with letting go. Her daughter will be 18 in a couple of months, and she's a little bit freaking out. She's always been in control of her meds and her foods, and transitioning is hard to think about. So I know you're all in various stages with your children, but any insights or thoughts that you can provide on kind of letting go as a parent?
Ron, why don't you take this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, don't have kids. No. Too late.
Oh, wait, is that not an option?
Send them back.
Yeah. It was the best, worst idea ever. Oh, I feel like I have to answer this question. I have a 19-year-old who's on his own, who I sobbed my head off over yesterday because it is so hard. You can't go back. We always practiced. I always made, and Riley is not on medication, so I'm not completely able to answer this, and I'm going to just be completely transparent about that. But we always made him do his own meds from 14 on. And where I would oversee them, it was still his responsibility if they have that capacity, right? So there's a difference in each story. He's up for his 5-year bone marrow transplant. And we're kind of in this conundrum of, do I make the appointment? Does he make the appointment? Do I make the appointment? And I think they're always going to need us. Like, you need people in your, but Kyle, you could answer it too. You were 17 when you were diagnosed, so you can answer it from a whole different perspective. I'm still freaking out. It's been a year and a half of letting go, and but they have to live their lives, and you have to give them the ability to advocate for themselves, to take care of themselves, because it's their life. It's not their diagnosis. It's not their tragedy. It's their life that they're taking care of. And I always try and tell my kiddo, I'm like, yes, you have a few more doctor's appointments than everybody else, but guess what? I had to go get skin cancer burned off my face, and I have to go get my teeth cleaned. And, everybody has a thing, and empowering him to know that he's just taking care of his life.
And I think to add to that, I don't have a teenager, so I, not in the same position like Katie and you, but I think that, your kids, I think you already have done a lot with, just being that positive person, and, kids watch what you do. You try to empower them and throughout their life. And I think that, they see how you deal with situations. And so you just hope that they take that with them, and like Katie said, I think I'm not there yet, but oh my gosh, can only imagine.
I'm not a parent. I'm not a parent, but it occurs to me that it's hard for every mom, regardless of a rare disease, right? And I think we all have this tendency, rightfully so, to point to our rare disease when things happen and say, this is hard because of FA or hard because of whatever it is. But some things are just hard for everyone, and it's the situation, not specifically the disease.
Yeah, I would. Carolina, she grew up in Colombia. Like, things I'm watching on TV, I was listening to your intro, and I was like, "Oh, you're amazing."
Yeah.
So
I would.
You're right. Sorry. You're right, though, right? Like, it's like that whole. It's hard for everybody. It's just rare disease has an extra little layer on it.
But I think you're just a parent forever too, right? So I think it doesn't mean that after this it's going to end, right? I'm sure they will call you. I'm sure Katie will be sending out more appointments.
No, they don't. They don't call you.
I'll have to tell you. I won't tell you how old Laura is because she'd probably get me. But I'm still having to. Sometimes she'll say something. I have to go. Ooh, you can't say that. It's not your business. I still want to tell her what to do.
Yeah. See, it doesn't matter. My mom still tells me what to do. I'm almost 40, so.
It's finding that balance, I guess.
Well, thank you so much. Those were really great comments and really great questions from the audience. So thank you to the audience for the engagement, and Kyle and Sean for moderating that discussion.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Special thanks to our friend and audio producer, Jake Tompkins.